Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about fasting. And if you're anything like me, when you hear the word fasting, probably the first thing that you think about is food. And because there's so many stories in the scriptures about people fasting from food. One of the stories that sticks out to me is in Luke chapter 4, and it's the very beginning of Jesus' ministry. One of the first things that he does is he goes out into the desert and he doesn't eat anything for 40 days. That's like over a month. That's such a long time. And it doesn't have to be as extreme as that. Fasting needs to become this thing where we think about it in this bigger way than just like this constricted, like, well, you got to give up food for 40 days. That's the only way to fast. Like, it can be such a bigger thing than that. And so I kind of want to give you some thoughts on ways that maybe you could be participating in fasting. And the first one that I kind of want to talk about is with food fasting. Something that it can be as simple as like missing a lunch, maybe. Maybe on Wednesdays you take like that lunchtime that you have and you say, you know what, I'm not going to eat lunch today. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray for like our worship service later on tonight. I'm going to pray for my friends. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to meditate and just kind of be quiet and give this time back to God. It can be this time in which we really like give up these physical needs that we have and we focus on the spiritual needs that we have. We can focus so much on like the physical needs, like I need to sleep, I need food, and we do need those things. But we can sometimes overlook these spiritual needs that we have. And fasting is a way to remember that we have these spiritual needs that also need to be taken care of. For some people, like food fasting is almost impossible because they have medical needs, because they have different things going on. Like the thought of fasting from food can be like very dangerous for them. And so people like that can sometimes feel like kind of left out, and they can go like, well, I can't really fast because I just can't. It's like medically dangerous for me. And I want to say, yeah, you should probably not food fast, but there's different ways that you can be participating with fasting. Let me give another example. Like we can be fasting from social media. Maybe you say like on Fridays, I'm going to be free from social media. I'm not going to scroll just mindlessly on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, or whatever. Instead, I'm going to take that time and I'm going to give it back to God. I'm going to take that time, I'm going to pray, I'm going to talk to my family and my friends about like deep spiritual things. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to go just sit outside and just be still in God's creation. There's so many different things that you can be doing with that time, and it's a way to give that time back to God and focus on our own spiritual needs. Something else that we can be fasting from, just like as simply, is the idea of like TV, or maybe like YouTube fits better in there for you. Netflix, whatever, that like we can be fasting a day from that. We can be like, you know what, today I'm not going to be just like watching The Office all day. Instead, I'm going to take that time and I'm just going to focus on what is God telling me in my life today. I'm going to do a lot of meditating. I'm going to do some prayer. I'm going to read my Bible. Even if it's as simple as like on Fridays I usually wake up and I watch The Office for the first 2 hours or whatever. Be like, I'm going to take that time instead and I'm going to devote it to God. And it can look so many different ways. It doesn't just have to look like, it can be way bigger than even the things that I mentioned. One of my favorite stories from the Bible is the story of Daniel and his fast. So we call it the Daniel fast now. And it's the idea of like, I'm not going to eat all this like gross food, this gross fatty food. Instead, I'm going to eat like fresh things. And in that way, in this story, I would encourage you to go read this in the Old Testament. In this story, he kind of gives his diet up to God, and he's still eating every day, but he's just eating like fresh things. And so even in that, it's a fast where he was fasting for the glory of God. And so I encourage you to go into your Bibles, find a story about fasting, but also see the story that was surrounding it. Because oftentimes when we read a story about fasting in the Bible, it's usually surrounded by like these intense times where God is doing something and the people are fasting because they want to hear what God is trying to tell them in their everyday life. So I encourage you to take a little baby step. It doesn't have to be this intense thing where you go, I'm not going to eat for a week. And like, don't do that, like immediately. Don't do that. That's like a dangerous step to take medically. But I encourage you to take a little baby step. Maybe you just miss a meal and you say, you know what, instead of eating lunch today, I'm going to pray. I'm going to take that time and I'm going to focus it on God. Or maybe you take that little baby step and you go, you know what, in the mornings from like as soon as I wake up until 10 o'clock, I'm not going to let myself just like stream on like Netflix or whatever. Instead, I'm going to take that time and I'm going to give it back to God somehow. And so there's so many different ways that it can look. I encourage you to give it a shot, and I'm excited to hear some stories about what fasting looks like for you in your life.